Hey guys, welcome.
Hello.
I'm Reed.
I'm Shannan.
And welcome to the Rethink Parenting Podcast.
Where we talk about all the parenting things.
Well, we just pretty much talk about our own parenting. And then we're just hoping that it helps other people.
Basically.
Or what we've seen, too, I guess.
That is true as well. I have a lot more experience in observing parents than I do as an actual parent.
That's true. I've learned a lot of, hey, don't do that through parents. I've also learned a lot of, like, man, that's awesome. I would have never thought of that if I didn't see you do that.
Absolutely. I wish I was as good at implementing the really good things I've seen as I would like to be, though.
I think I'm really good at, I don't think I'm really good at implementing. I think I'm really good at doing the avoiding. Like, I should avoid doing that.
I may not improve on it, but I at least won't do that.
I just won't do that part. I just feel like I'm drawn to the terrible. Yeah. So my attention is, like, sparked by, wow, that's bad. I shouldn't do that. But whatever. We all have our things. I'm sure somebody looks at me and is like, wow, you probably shouldn't parent that way.
Oh, I'm positive people think that about me.
Well, you know, as we're going on our second week of talking about video games. And their effect on that thing. You know, just drop in the comments your worst thing that you do as a parent.
Yeah.
That other people would notice.
Or the thing that you're like, if I do one thing well as a parent, it's this.
Oh, yeah, that'd be good too.
Share your success with us too.
Well, honestly, if you drop the good one, I'm not going to read it. But if you drop the bad one, I'll read it.
That is, he does like.
I'm just drawn to that.
Commiserating.
Yeah. I'm just drawn. I want to know what to avoid in my own parenting. Oh. Shannan, what is your thing that people will notice you do as a parent that you would be terrified if they brought it up to you?
Oh, I'm a natural consequence kind of parent. Oh, okay. So like, whenever my kids like are in a pushing, shoving, wrestling thing and they fall and they're like sobbing, I was like, that's why I told you not to do that. Like, I have zero sympathy with natural consequence. I was like, I should probably be more sympathetic in this moment. But I'm like, Shannan. This is why mom tells you not to do that. Yeah, like, that's the first thing.
You're such an empath.
I know.
I mean, wow, you're so good at that.
Yeah. So
interesting.
I'm sure people think I'm a pretty calloused spirit at times when I'm like, that's why I said not to do that.
Oh yeah, this won't surprise you, but I obnoxiously give way more than probably I should. So, like, I'll be like, Kinley, it's time to go to bed. She'll be like, okay, can we do this one more thing? And I'm like, yeah, of course. Then it's like 4 or 5 more things later because she keeps doing it. And I'm like, yeah, why not? What can it hurt? But it's like another hour goes by.
Our youngest tries to do that. And
you don't put up with it?
She gets her book, but then at the very end, she'll be like, just one more book, Mommy, one more book. And I'm like, Mom will read 1 page. And so now she'll say, 1 page, Mom, read 1 page. Because she knows that now that one page is all she's got left in her arsenal.
Yeah. That's good. All right, so this week we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to finish our conversation on video games. Mm-hmm. Last time we talked about, really why do we play, and then the community aspect of video games.
Right.
Today we're going to get a little bit more into the violence aspect and then performance.
Yeah, which I feel like the violence was like the hot trigger when I was really getting into video games and it was becoming a bigger thing in our era, like more than any of the other issues you could possibly have with video games. And at that time, I think it was the only obvious one. There wasn't enough research on how video games can affect the mind or kids or community and that kind of stuff. So it was obvious, like, oh, violence. Let's harp on that piece of it.
Yeah, and in reality, it really still is. Most of video games is, like, sports-related or, like, violent-related.
Yeah.
Like, there really is not a whole lot other.
I mean, unless you're on your cell phone. Unless
you're on your phone.
And then it's all the, like, matching stuff and the candy stuff and all that.
Yeah, all those
things. The Sudoku. It's the semi-intellectual genre.
Pool. The chess online chess.
Othello?
You can play poker.
Are you an Othello player?
No, not at all. I play violent games and I play sports games. Games are really overly dependent on violence as like a mechanism. The violence is what really gives what I think game developers would dictate as this is what sells.
Right.
And gives gamers an outlet.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is like kind of, if we develop a game that has a lot of violence in it or different type of violence or whatever, then they get way more feedback on that.
Yeah, and I think like anything else, it really is just how are you being intentional and observant with a particular culture of your kid. Like, yeah. I think we could generalize and say video games or sports or violence, but I mean, there's a lot of Nintendo stuff that I would not put in either of those categories. I mean, you have all your Mario stuff and things.
Sure, yeah. Mario Kart.
Yeah, your kart racing. Your Mario Party stuff. Like, those were the things I played a lot of.
What do you do in Mario Party?
Which one?
I'm gonna try to debunk that anything can go into the sports or violent category.
Mario Party, you have puzzles. You have fishing.
Have you ever... Fishing is violence.
Fishing would be more sports than violence, I think.
or a sport.
So it's violent sport.
It's actually both.
As you fish for coins and treasure.
Yeah, you're not debunking anything for me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But just like anything else, it's about what is it teaching your kid, I think, and what age your kid is at to understand the reality versus the play aspect of what they're doing. So our oldest has a game on his tablet at his bio dad's that's called Kick the Buddy or something like that, and it's literally this dummy and you just beat him up. Like, you're just like taking knives and kicking it and like being mean to this fake thing.
It's a faceless whatever.
Yeah, it's a faceless
body.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's so weird.
It's very cartoony. Like, it's not like you would look at it and be like, oh, that's violent.
But they do have realistic versions of that game.
Right, yeah, but it's also teaching violence. Like, regardless of if there's blood or gore or any of that stuff, it's like a little marshmallow man. It's teaching violence. And so we've talked about how we don't have that game at our house because we like to practice kindness. So that's kind of where we're at with our kids, is what we're doing in our virtual world should somehow also be something that's acceptable in our real world. And we merge those two worlds. That what we do the same thing everywhere. It doesn't matter if it's fake or not. And so one day, I probably won't have a problem with my kid doing shooter games. I did shooter games in college, but I also knew that was fake. I was not going to go out and sniper someone. Like, the boundaries of society had set into my brain at that point, and that kind of stuff. So
also that you're totally not capable either. Like,
I have other weapons of choice if it came down to it.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad. Yeah. I don't know what else it would be, but like, I don't even want to. I would rather stay in the mystery of what weapons you would choose in a Mortal Kombat kind of environment.
Oh,
but that's fine.
I can show you sometime.
No, I'm good.
I may or may not own some of them.
I'm good. That seems really violent, and I don't want to be a part of it. I'm good. Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Like, I don't think that at all either one of us are saying what happens in the virtual gaming world. There's no evidence to prove that is linked to real world violence or whatever. I got a text. This is cool. But it does kind of, the wind here is we need to be aware of it, and we need to be able to see their surroundings and also be able to have the conversations. Mm-hmm. See what are the conversation starters in the games, because in reality it's not necessarily it's not really the game that they're playing or whatever, but it is, why is violence, which is a question I would probably pose to you or to any parent, why is violent media prevalent but also extremely popular in our culture? Like, why is that a thing?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you could probably do a lot of scientific stuff. You could also go back to the original sin, or the first sin after the fall was violence. Like, that's the first thing we read about in Genesis. So there's just something in our broken human nature that escalates to that point of dominance any way we possibly can. So, I mean, you could probably do a lot of things to talk about why that's so prevalent, but I think there is a piece of us in our brokenness that we just know if we can dominate in life like this, then we win somehow. And then if you haven't listened to our sermon from this past weekend, it's a perfect tie-in to there's a third way, there's a better way than either I win or I lose. And right. I think helping your kid understand that, like, there are moments where we need to stick up for the other person no matter what, and there are moments where we need to not show our strength but hold back on our strength and things of that nature. But there is a third way of life that Jesus talks about, and helping them understand when are certain things okay versus saying no violence ever.
Yeah. And the question that I want to ask you is then, when would it be okay and when is it not? Mm-hmm. And when would violent video games be not necessarily justified, but not justified?
Right.
Like, you let it go. It's fine.
So I think it's first establishing with your kids and having the conversation of when is quote violence okay? And even defining that word, like, that can be a really gray terminology just to say violence. Well, like, would you consider sticking up for somebody that's getting beaten up by the bullies and getting the bully out of the way to save someone? Is that violence, or is that courage? Is that is that bravery? Like, so really defining some of your terms with your kids on, when I say this thing, this is when, if I say violence, I mean you're beating up on somebody for no reason other than it makes you feel good. It's being inconsiderate. It's being like, these are the words that we put around this term when we're talking about it.
Yeah, and every family really does have, whether you realize it or not, a cultural definition for those terms. Like, my parents never had to tell me that. My parents never had to tell me what each of those things meant.
Right.
But I kind of got that, like, just built into me.
And I think something you
good or bad.
Right, and something you can do, and not around the video games, but it will definitely overlap to that. It's what my mom did when we were growing up, is when we were watching stuff on the TV, she would point out and basically define what we were watching for us, so that over time I just knew these things were right, these things were wrong, like that kind of stuff. So if somebody said a bad word, like stupid, while we were watching something, she'd be like, oh, that's a bad word. It wasn't immediately, oh, we're turning this off. So it showed us, like, there's always going to be bad stuff. We have to learn how to filter how bad is too bad. So there were times where it's like, at some point, we're like, okay, too much, we're turning this off as a family. Like, we said bad word too many times, or we said close your eyes too many times, or things of that nature. But it helped me start seeing and connecting what is good, what is bad, what are lines we don't cross, kind of stuff. And then that trickles out into all of your life. So having some of those habits as a family, I think, help defining what is violence exactly. When is it okay to stand up for somebody? When should I just take it and then go to the authorities and say, hey, this happened, it's not okay, I need your help fixing this? Like, how do we navigate our social surroundings and decide it's my responsibility versus it's somebody else's responsibility to handle a bad situation, and how are acceptable ways of handling that? And it's an extensive conversation that happens all through life. Yeah. And I mean, it even starts with your kids when they're like, our boys, they wrestle. Like, boys wrestle. Like, and eventually they wrestle to the point where somebody loses and they start crying because they couldn't keep up with the other person. It happened with me and my sister. Like, it's just a sibling thing. And teaching your kids, okay, you entered this fray willingly, and just because you couldn't keep up doesn't automatically mean what they were doing was wrong, because you were okay with it in the beginning.
Yeah.
And helping them understand the decisions that you make lead to consequences, good or bad. There are consequences for every decision we make. But also teaching them, like, hey, sticking up for somebody that's getting tossed around, that's a good thing, even if it's maybe too far on its own.
Sure.
So I think once you have all of those conversations, then you can start getting into what is the boundary for my kid at this age. I'm not going to let my 4-year-old play Call of Duty.
What? She's going to be awesome, though.
Even though I think they have.
Yeah, I mean, when you start a team...
on the whole, they play Plants vs. Zombies. Like, that's kind of their going...
If you're going to hashtag squad up, then you got to get the squad together.
I know.
If she's in the squad, then...
I know.
There's nothing you can do.
I mean, she'll probably take them all down one day, but...
Yeah.
She'll probably be a little sniper on top of the buildings. Just... But it's just that boundary you have to decide as a parent, like... and I think I had a college professor that kind of gave us this thought process with movies. It was our movie class. And I think this is kind of portrayed... It's a good thought for video games as well. You may be okay with horror movies, and you may be okay with the gore and all of that kind of stuff. But when you're watching those movies and deciding how far is too far, you also have to equate to the fact those are real humans in the movies going through those things. And so I think talking through video games and the difference between Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto, what are we practicing here? Like, are we practicing things that we really in the real world would say, yeah, these are, if the situation is the right situation, I would be acceptable with this? Or are we practicing things that were like, in another life, I would never want to be this person? Like, so I think both are violent games.
Do you mean breaking into cars, selling drugs, and running away from the police?
I mean, if that's your thing.
That's pretty much all of Grand Theft Auto.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. I'm saying, so they both have violence. They both have things that, on the whole, I'm not going to tell people to go do. But one is doing it out of valor, courage, things that you can talk to your kids about. You know, this is what the military does. Like, there are positive conversations you can have out of that. And in the same say, okay, now when are times that this would not be acceptable?
Sure.
Grand Theft Auto has a lot of don't do that in it. So
yeah, and I'm actually really intrigued with the idea of ludonarrative dissonance. Have you heard of that?
No,
is
please.
That fancy? It's fancy, right?
Educate me.
I shall. But video games set out to make that happen. So the theory behind it, what it means is that the storyline and the gameplay have the same feel and vibe, and they weave, to do it really well, they would weave together in a really seamless way. So they have done studies that have been like, well, people buy our game more when this ludonarrative dissonance is at the top of its game. When they weave together in a really seamless way, people feel more a part of the story. And they feel like they're there in the person's shoes, so they sell more games. That's basically the thought. So, in reality, that's what we should really be careful with, and the conversation we should have, is where do you see yourself in that? Mm-hmm. Like, when you love GTA because you get to play, but then there's also this weird storyline where a lot of other crazy stuff is happening too that you're watching in between when you're playing and you're in between your gameplay. Why do you see yourself in this way that you're so caught up in the character, where it's actually you feel like it's you?
Right.
I think that's huge. And when we're talking about our kids' cognitive ability of shaping themselves, I think that's a really crucial piece to that. They're shaping who they are in real life. And if they visualize themselves as all these other things that are kind of wild, or like, man, I wish I could be this, or I wish I could do this. I think that those are huge opportunities for us to have conversations where,
right.
And it's telling us something that we could probably watch, but they wouldn't say.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. And it's not coming in guns blazing theoretically and being like, this is a terrible game, you shouldn't be playing it, it's unless it's like your 4-year-old, and then you can lay those ground rules, like it's the whole parenting square again. But with your teenagers and stuff, it's asking the questions that cause them to start thinking and connecting both of their worlds, the world that they live in and the world that they play in, and helping them understand the decisions we make should not be different in those two worlds.
Yeah.
And helping them own their identity of who they are and leading them through that process versus coming in and saying, well, I don't like it, you don't get to do it, and then being like, okay, boomer, and da-da-da-da-da, and then you get into all the memes,
here we go.
Next thing you know, you're a TikTok sensation.
Yeah, you're the worst. Yeah. You're running over your kids' video games with their lawnmower.
They're calling you Karen.
Doing all kinds of weird stuff. Yeah, we talked before, too, we were talking about the performance of it, and part of the good part is of games is that it's kind of a low-risk environment to make a lot of decisions, and then to see how your decisions react or how they affect what's going to happen in the future. A lot of RPG games are that way.
Yeah, and I mean, it can help with your time management. Like, I love those kinds of games because it gives me control over my world.
Yeah, right.
So if you have like controlling kids, it might get some of that angst out, but it teaches them how to do multiple things in a row and how to remember task management and curiosity, and there's like lots of positive skills that can happen in these games on problem solving and cooperative learning and all of that kind of stuff. You just have to make sure they're not letting that be a different morality that they're practicing versus the one you want them to be living in. Yeah,
it's really just trying to weave together that world and real life. Even then, failure is such a big thing in games. Mm-hmm. You can play the same mission like 100 times.
Yeah, and learning to control yourself.
And it gets super frustrating.
After you
start throwing remotes and whatever, but
breaking controllers.
But with the right conversation, that's taken into real life where it's like, yeah, dude, like we fail a lot. Mm-hmm. And we learn from the failures and we move on, and then we make better decisions. We learn how to react, we learn how to move, we learn how to do whatever out of this. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's really valuable as well. So I think for me, it's really just have the conversation, look for the good in what's happening, look for the bad in what's happening, then have another conversation.
Right.
And then really just try to mix the two worlds together. Yeah. Like don't allow them to be in total separate worlds and in different realities. Part of that is kind of helpful, but the other part is like, is that who you want to be, or is this who you want to be? And what does that look like?
And I think, like, I feel like most people can agree through COVID, we've realized there are good things of technology and virtual world and online friends and all that stuff. But I would say make sure the relationships closest to them are the people you can actually see. Because at the end of the day, people can be anyone they want to be online. You get into these co-ops and stuff. I think real relationship can happen through virtual realms and all that kind of thing, but especially in the teenage years when so much influence can happen, even with real life people, and you don't know it's going on, it can be even more dangerous in the virtual world. So helping your kids prioritize people over things, having the relationships that are closest to them being the ones that are kids that you can go talk to their parents and find out what are they learning. Like, so there's a little bit more accountability in that, I'd say, as another piece of the puzzle, just to keep healthy boundaries at a young age. And then play with your kid. Yeah. Like, don't let it be just their thing. Even if it is their thing, coming down in their world every now and then is a good thing for every parent.
And they will crush you.
Yeah, and they'll love it. And it'll be an experience you remember forever.
Absolutely crush you. And if you're a parent that is crushing your kid in games, Like,
buy a new game.
Put that in the chat, man. That's awesome. I'm so proud of you.
Oh, I saw a video the other day of a mom talking about marrying the gamer boy, and then they created 4 more gamer boys, and they just have a gaming room where they all play Minecraft.
You gotta do what you gotta do. Yeah, and that is really important. I think in reality, it's even more important to teach authenticity and transparency online, because it's the only way that you actually find that community. Is where it is really transparent.
Yeah.
So, I think that's all for this one. So we had a good 2-episode conversation. Yeah. Check out our first one, then listen to this one, or if you listen to this one and then you go
back and watch.
I guess you can. It's really out of order, but it's all the same. It works.
Yeah.
So we'll talk to you guys next time.
Yeah. See you in a bit.
See ya.
Bye.